another edition of Marriage Encounter. We are delighted to be with you on the airways of Second Advent Radio, and also those of you who are listening via Facebook Live or SLC Adventists. We are delighted to have you. We have been for the last few weeks talking about protecting your marriage from intruders. We appreciate so much the responses that many of you have given regarding the benefits that you are deriving from this program. And we are so delighted that we are able to make a difference. We trust that your relationship is doing wise, and as you implement the principles, that your marriage will grow stronger. With me today, Dr. Greene, is Dr. Mark Braithwaite. Dr. Braithwaite, welcome to Marriage Encounter.
Thank you, Doc, and thank you for all of our viewing and listening audiences. We are grateful for your presence today, as always, and looking forward to another lively discussion. It just seems every week, Doc, the time gets shorter and shorter as we get into our discussion. By the time we get into the meat of the matter, sometimes the time is running out. So, but it's really exciting, and we're looking forward to just sharing with you folks again today. Thanks for being here, and call somebody, remind them that Marriage Encounter is on.
That is right. That is right. We want to invite you to have a word of prayer with us now, shall we? Eternal Father and our God, be with us as we go into today's program. We pray for your wisdom, your grace, and your guidance. Take full control and grant us understanding as we share today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Doc, we have had some meaningful discussions over the past few weeks. As you indicated, sometimes it appears as though the time gets shorter. Over the weekend, I met somebody who said, listen, there's one thing I want to say to you folks. You've got to change the time from half an hour to 1 hour. But we're grateful that the program is meaningful. And we want to jump right into the discussion today because, as you know, we do have some challenges with respect to time. We were looking at this matter, Dr. Braithwaite, of the fact that intimacy, the thing that we are aspiring to, can sometimes create a problem. Last week, we shared on issues that come from within the marriage that can impact the marriage relationship. We're talking about creating space for intruders. So it seems to me as though if I were to sum things up, what we want to say is that we want to function in such a way to ensure that there is no opportunity for intruders to come into the relationship.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And as we spoken over the last few weeks on this matter, we are very clear that emotionally we can create avenues, maybe unwittingly so, maybe you're not quite aware that you are providing a space for an intruder when, as a spouse, you do not give your spouse the opportunity to share their deepest concerns and feelings, etc., etc. And so your spouse may then feel that need to discuss it with somebody else, which creates or has the potential to create an environment where somebody else can sort of get into the emotional space. And we really want to avoid this at all costs. And so we're suggesting that developing the skill to be able to engage your spouse in meaningful conversations, addressing significant issues, even though they may be hard. We're saying it's important to really spend time addressing those issues, learning how to deal with conflict appropriately, and engage in discussions that may sometimes be uncomfortable, but are very important to have, so that you can protect each other's emotional space.
I'm really glad you shared that perspective, Dr. Braithwaite, because I think that sets the stage for what we want to talk about today. Last week we were looking at the whole matter of filling the vacuum, that space that's created there. So let's build on that, and permit me to say that the challenge, I believe, in many respects, is that sometimes individuals do not know their limits. Remember, we're talking about this in the wider context of boundaries. And so if we don't know our limits, sometimes, Doc, our couples have this problem with intruders because, and when we say intruders, remember, friends, we're talking about not just individuals, but it could be things, it could be activities, it could be other engagements, work, and even children, we said, that will come in and rob you from the quality time that you ought to have with your spouse. Sometimes couples mistakenly say, Doc, okay, I realize that this may be an issue, but I'll deal with that a little later on. And so we push off something without dealing with it right now. We tend to say things like, I'm going to attend to that. Maybe next week I'll change. I'll do better next week. But for right now, I want to get this done. What's the danger in that approach?
Well, I think first of all, Doc, as we look at this, we need to be aware of our limitations. We do not have just inordinate amounts of time or energy or in just there waiting. We get tired. That's the point, and time runs out. And if we then we will do exactly what you're suggesting, and that is to say, okay, I'll get to this later, not recognizing that very thing that maybe your spouse needs to address with you is of such a crucial nature that putting it off can mean that spouse may, as a result, turn to some other resource in order to address this issue, particularly if it's something that has been long-standing, something that has been maybe bothering him or her for a long time. They've now got the courage to come and talk to you about it. Now, remember, Doc, you didn't say, I don't have the time now, but we can talk about it at 6 o'clock this evening. You just said, we don't have the time to deal with this now. And usually the time never comes. And so what happens is you're now opening the door for your spouse to find some resolution to this matter, which can invite intruders into the relationship.
Exactly. And I think that's the crucial thing here. It is not so much that I don't want to attend to the situation. Maybe I am a little unsure of what the outcome might be. Or maybe I am so bent on doing what I am engaged in right now. Sometimes people find themselves torn between, okay, I am involved in a community outreach project and I don't really want to walk away from that. And my spouse is complaining that I'm not spending enough time at home. And in my mind, I'm saying, yeah, that might be true, she has a point, but I'm going to fix that. I'm going to fix that, but not today, maybe next week. And you rightly said, the time never comes. We keep kicking the ball further down the road. And with every kick further down the road, the marriage becomes more stressful. And sometimes our spouses may even get to the point where they stop talking because they may conclude that, they have expressed themselves enough and we're not hearing. And what happens is that they withdraw further. And what happens now is that they say, well, I'm trying to get my spouse's attention and I'm not getting his attention. I might as well just occupy myself with something else. So that compounds the issue, because what we're doing is that we're creating more space, more opportunities for intruders to come in.
Absolutely. And, that if both spouses sort of take on that attitude, we can only imagine what the outcome might be, because at the end of the day, persons will become so far removed from each other that obviously the door is widened for intruders to enter. And I want to go back here just to make a point, Doc, because I think it's really important, because sometimes we have these discussions and persons think what we're talking about might not be so important, and they're not realizing that what has been happening is that their relationship is being undermined by these intruders. And they're beginning to wonder, why is it that I'm not feeling connected to my spouse anymore? Why is it that, we seem to have so many challenges? But it's because sometimes we're not taking care of what we consider to be these little things. The Bible speaks about, be careful of the little foxes that spoil the vines. They're little things, but they have huge implications. And, I just want to make it really clear here that this discussion that we've been having for the last few weeks about intruders is such an important discussion. If you're really interested in growing your relationship and preserving it and really enjoying it, understanding this matter of paying attention to these things is so critical and so crucial.
Very much so. You know, I think one of the issues that married couples need to confront is whether or not my ability or willingness, rather, to address the issue of intrusion in the relationship is not reflective of a bigger issue. You know, my whole attitude towards the marriage, you know, this idea that, you know, I may not have too much anxiety about the problems that come from my spouse complaining that I'm not present. And maybe that's my whole attitude towards everything. So that the issue is maybe I am too nonchalant. I just have a lackadaisical attitude about everything, and thinking that things will work themselves out. Nothing bad will happen if I don't respond to my spouse's call right now. Maybe I may be thinking, listen, my spouse loves me so much, she will never pack up and leave. So I'm going to have opportunity next month to deal with this. I'm going to plan a vacation, and I'm going to take my spouse on a vacation, and we're going to have all the time in the world. And we really don't understand how significant it is to stop and listen when our spouse makes a complaint, shares a concern. You know, maybe you need to look internally at yourself. Is this my attitude? Is this how I relate to my work? Is this how I relate to a child calling for attention here and there? Let me address the issue now, because tomorrow, the wise man in the book of Proverbs says, boast not thyself of tomorrow, for thou knowest not what the day may bring forth. And I like to interpret that to mean, do not put off for tomorrow what you can do today, because you can't never be sure about tomorrow.
Yes, Doc. Wow, such a powerful point. You know, and as we consider this, you highlighted something that I just want to go back to. You know, a lack of anxiety about marital problems. That's such an interesting point. You know, early in marriages, people speak about how anxious they were about problems that they could see developing, etc., and it made them uncomfortable. And sometimes couples get to the place where they're no longer anxious about the challenges in their relationship. There's no longer any anxiety. And it might speak to a place where you have become so comfortable with challenges that, you know, or you may have developed what Cloud and Townsend calls safety nets, where whenever you have a challenge, you no longer look to your spouse, or you no longer even seek to have a resolution of the challenge. You don't even seek to resolve it. You simply proceed because you have a safety net. You have somebody else you can talk to, your parents, a child, a co-worker, you know, a good friend. And so the truth is that the relationship, in terms of its emotional, the emotional part of your relationship is probably, you know, very dead. You know, has been really just really stunted, because you no longer find any need to address the issue. And that's not a very nice place to be, number one, because it really makes the couple feel very separated. And secondly, again, we've been speaking, it creates that space for intruders. And so, you know, it really hurts the relationship in a very, very big way. And so, you know, we consider it and recognize that it is, you know, based on what you've shared, it's something that we need to really think about carefully.
I'm going to use the term, Doc, taking the marriage for granted, or not giving priority to your marriage. I believe when we get to that stage where, as you said, there is the loss of anxiety about certain issues, that effectively what has happened is that we believe we're now married, things are going to work out itself. It's a dangerous place to be. You know, you are not giving priority to your relationship. It is important for us, if you are married, and if you're listening, and I want you to pay attention to this, friends, if you are married, you have the right to give priority to your marriage. We want you to think of the marriage as an active living organism that requires care, nurturing, support. And if you don't give attention to it, if you are not growing your relationship, then your relationship is dying. It is not something that you can just put down there and it lies static until you pick it up again.
Right.
You have to give attention to your marriage. Otherwise, some time ago, Doc, we used the term just allowing things to slide. And we did say that if you do no bad thing, but you don't do these nice little things, the relationship is going to go downhill. So a marriage is something that requires constant care, nurturing, nourishment, encouragement, affirmation. All of these things are necessary for a meaningful relationship. And somebody may be saying, wow, that's real hard work. Well, it's hard work, but you can make it fun at the same time.
Right. And that's the essential, journey of marriage, because marriage can really be fun. And, sometimes we've said it, at least I've said it, I think we've said it here, sometimes we take ourselves a bit too seriously, and we don't know how to enjoy ourselves and enjoy relationships and to enjoy the differences that we find with each other. Sometimes it can be frustrating, I agree, but we need to sometimes lighten up a bit and recognize that we are different, and those differences are not things that we need necessarily to be afraid of, but we need to embrace and accept, rather than trying to change the person. We can engage them for who they are, and begin to enjoy those differences to some extent. But ultimately, the desire is to grow the relationship, to make it fun, to make it enjoyable, to make it a place of safety in particular, where we can feel comfortable with each other.
And I want to just pick up on the word fun. If your relationship gets to the stage where it becomes a routine, a monotony, where you are just going to work every day and you're coming home and maybe you're religious, so you go to church. But if it's just this predictable schedule work, and these days work can become so consuming, when you have to consider the traffic. Some individuals stay 2 hours commute time, and by the time they get home, they're burnt out, they crush. And the next day and the next day, and you don't have these times when you have fun together. You need to take stock of where you are and determine that you're going to do something else. And that's why marriage encounter is so important, because what we're saying now is that you ought to stop and consider, where is my relationship? Am I really enjoying my marriage, or am I enduring my marriage? Right. Question to ponder. Marriage is not to be endured. It is to be enjoyed.
Enjoyed. Yeah, definitely. I don't think people said I do to endure, the happily ever after scenario, that many people desire, but don't recognize that it actually takes some work, to get there, and that work is supposed to be work of heart, meaning that it's an emotional journey, but it's one that can really cause you to enjoy, the experience. The whole idea of taking relationships for granted, and maybe, when we think about that, and those who are listening and viewing, I mean, maybe you can ask yourself the question, am I taking my marriage for granted? As husbands, are we taking our relationship, our marriage for granted? And what are some of the things that we are doing that might send that message to our spouse? The lack of care and consideration, as we contemplate this whole notion of intruders, and the fact that sometimes you're just not there, Doc. Sometimes you're just not there. You're always out. You're always at some, a class takes precedence. You just completed one course, except that you're doing a degree program and you've run right into something else. You're always out. Work is taking all of your time. Are we really taking our relationships for granted?
I want to say two things, Doc. One is, if you are driving a vehicle and you hear something unusual, you're hearing a squeak, or you're feeling a little wobble, and you say, well, I'm going to deal with that sometime else. And you ignore it. And you keep driving the vehicle without giving attention to it. The squeak may become even louder, or the wobble may become more pronounced, but you ignore it. One of these days, you're going to be driving down the highway and the wheel is going to fall off, you know, or some other tragedy. You may end up in an accident that ends up hurting somebody else. And who do you have to blame? Because you ignored the warning signals. I want to say this. This is the second thing I want to say. If you're in a relationship and you're at the point where the presence of your spouse makes you uncomfortable, there is no chemistry, there is no dialogue, there is no communication, there is no affirmation and affection, something is terribly wrong. You are taking your marriage for granted, and you need to give attention to it, because that is an environment where space will become available for intruders. And what happens, Doc, and I don't want people to necessarily think we're talking here only about another man or woman stepping in, as we have been emphasizing. It could be something to distract you from the stress of your spouse. Now, if your spouse becomes stressful, then that's a real challenge. And if you are every day living with stress, you're going to become physically sick. So emotional burdens are going to lead to physical burdens, and it complicates the whole matter. So again, going back to what we said next week, humble yourself, admit that your behavior has not been the best, or say politely and calmly to your spouse, listen, my observations are that, you know, there is too much tension here. Can we sit down and discuss this? Can we put things on the table and try to come to some meaningful resolution? Can we call in somebody to talk to us? Can we go to a counselor? Can we do a checkup? Can we check the state of our relationship? Because it's not what it used to be. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and remember that where you are now did not happen overnight, right? So the fix is not generally going to be an overnight fix either. But I want to stress the fact that it did not happen overnight, and it was the continual allowance of intruders generally that caused you to probably be where you are now, or you know, having the sentiments and the feelings that you're having now, and so again, you know, for those who are coming up behind, the younger couples, you know, pay attention to this. This is really, really important. Wherever you are, on your job, sitting at your desk right now, you know, standing there talking. Maybe, you know, sort of before a customer, hopefully not. But wherever you are in your relationship and in your position where you are at work right now or at home, what we're saying is pay attention to these little things, you know, as your marriage moves forward. Do not allow important things to just slide and go unnoticed, so to speak. Address issues, speak to them politely, bring them to the fore. Your spouse may not be very happy in the first instance, but the more that you do it, and particularly doing it in a polite way, your spouse will begin to recognize that you have interest in the success of the journey that you're on, and may begin to engage you, especially if it's done in a polite, meaningful, harmonious way. You know, using all of the skills and resources that you've been learning over the years on Marriage Encounter to engage a discussion and to say, listen, we've been doing this wrong for a while now. You know, what we've been doing is not working. Let's try this. You know, let's try this way that we've been hearing on Marriage Encounter to engage, to discuss, to, you know, really grow our relationship so that we can have, you know, we can have a healthy relationship going down the road. That's the thing that we really want to encourage.
Doc, I mean, you said it, but I want to reemphasize, and I'm going to use different words, because your relationship may not readily say to you things are bad. You said it will not happen overnight, or it didn't come to fruition overnight. I want to say it this way, that your marriage can go on for quite a while without you realizing that things aren't the way they're supposed to be, because they may be gradual things. They may be so gradual. You just maybe get a promotion at work and you're spending an extra half an hour at work, and that turns into an extra hour at work. And gradually, you become consumed with something else outside of the marriage that is taking up the time that you generally devote to shared activities. And the shared activities become less and less. You may not necessarily miss it at first because you're busy, you're occupied. It is not that you're there sitting down all by yourself saying, I feel lonely. You're so engaged, so involved that you're not realizing that distance is taking place between you and your spouse. And without an intentional approach to sit down and to view where things are, it may hit you when it's a little too late. Or worse yet, you may see inklings of it, inclinations here and there, but you tell yourself, oh, maybe things aren't so bad. We will get to that. And those are the dangers that we want you to avoid.
Yeah, yeah. You know, so very well put. Yeah, the discussion is so critical, because I feel like, you know, couples have this struggle, and feel this distance, this growing distance in the relationship. Maybe they felt it from quite early, but didn't quite understand what it was about. Now you can actually go and pinpoint, because you can identify a lot of these things, Doc, by taking a good view of your relationship. I would hear people say, you know, you'd hear persons say, oh, we used to spend time together. You know, we used to go for a walk. You would hear people say things like that. You know, since you got the promotion, as you mentioned, you know, you spend so much more time at work. And these are the very things that we're talking about, these are the very intruders. Now, you mentioned, and it's a very, very important point, because sometimes people only see intruders as, you know, the person may be showing interest in another person. And that you know, it might be, but it may not be the main thing. The intruder could be the new vehicle. It could be church. You know, it could be the children. That intruder could be, you know, the person became a member of some type of a service organization. You know, I mean, it could be the gym. Person has become so caught up in gymming now that that's their life. And these are these are things that you can actually identify when you look around. You begin to look at your relationship. You can begin to say, you know, my wife took up this new hobby, and that's all that happens now. She's just crocheting all the time, you know, or she's just painting all the time. No time for me anymore. And as you mentioned, that might have come out of a greater concern where your wife was feeling a sense of emptiness and feeling a sense of being withdrawn, and felt that she needed to fill her own void because there was a void coming from your end, or vice versa. And so this could become a vicious cycle where each of you are just trying to fill an emptiness that you generally sort of filled for each other, but because of these intruders now, you know, you're having a really difficult time.
Well, Doc, we're gonna have to leave it there for today.
Wow.
Next week we want to share some signs, you know, some things that can say to you, hey, listen, you need to pay attention. But our time has expired today, so we look forward to being with you again next week. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, it's Marriage Encounter at slcadventist.org. That's Marriage Encounter at slcadventist.org. That's all the time we have for today. We will see you next week, same time. God bless.